In the last video, we talked about the distinction between necessary and sufficient conditions. In this video, we'll talk about how that relates to essences. So very roughly, each necessary condition for an individual x is an essential property of x. And the sufficient condition that consists of the conjunction of all necessary conditions for being an individual x is the essence of x. So this is just a way of talking. Each necessary condition is an essential property of something, and the sufficient condition that's informative, that consists of all of the necessary conditions, is the essence of the thing. So what does this mean? Let's think about an example. Here we have a giraffe carrying another giraffe, and let's give these giraffe names. So I'm thinking of these as ordinary proper names that we're introducing, like my name is Stephen Biggs, Barack Obama's name is Barack Obama, the giraffe on the left's name is Lefty, and the giraffe on the right's name is Righty. Now, here's a question. Is it essential to Lefty that she is carrying Righty? And what I want you to see now is how you go about answering that question. Here's how you do it. You ask yourself, does Lefty stop existing if she lets Righty walk? So if Lefty were to put down Righty, would that be the death of Lefty? Well, if that would be the death of Lefty, so if your answer is yes, then carrying Righty is an essential property of Lefty. But if it wouldn't be the death of Lefty, if Lefty would continue to exist, would continue to be Lefty, even after she put down Righty, then the answer is no. She doesn't stop existing if she lets Righty walk, and therefore carrying Righty is an accidental property of Lefty. Okay. Now, notice when I say stop existing, I don't mean that this bit of matter will vanish or disappear, or that the giraffe will fall down dead or anything like that. What I mean is just that she will no longer be Lefty. So presumably there's some changes that you could go through, for example, you as an individual, and still be you, like dyeing your hair, maybe growing or shrinking. And there's some changes that you couldn't go through and still be you. For example, perhaps if you went through radical amnesia, so that you had absolutely no memory or personality characteristics in common with, I guess amnesia doesn't entail personality characteristics. So let's just say a radical psychological transformation, so that you have no memory, no personality traits, no hopes, beliefs, desires, fears, nothing mentally in common with the person you are now. You might think, well, that's not you anymore. And if that's right, then some of your mentality is essential to being you. You might not think that, but I'm just giving you an illustration of what essential properties are like. Okay. How about this? Is it essential to Lefty that she is spotted? Well, if you want to answer that question, you ask this one. Does Lefty stop existing if she loses her spots? If you think if she were to lose her spots, she would no longer be Lefty. That is, if this animal were to lose its spots, it would cease to be Lefty. Then being spotted is an essential property of Lefty. But if you think that this animal would continue to be Lefty, then being spotted is not an essential property of Lefty. It's an accidental property. Okay. How about this? Is it essential to Lefty that she is a giraffe? So we need to ask, does Lefty stop existing if she stops being a giraffe? Suppose that some mad scientist comes along and reprograms the DNA in her cells, and consequently she goes through some radical transformations. That is, this bit of matter becomes a very different kind of matter. You might say, yes, that would no longer be Lefty. Because being a giraffe is an essential property of Lefty. Or you might say, so long as the psychology is preserved, it still is Lefty. There's all sorts of possibilities here. You have to sort of figure out what you think the right answer is. But what I want you to see for now is just this. If you say yes to this question, that Lefty stops existing if she stops being a giraffe, then you think being a giraffe is an essential property of Lefty. But if you say no, then you think being a giraffe is an accidental property of Lefty. Now, what about the essence of Lefty? Remember, we talked about essential properties as identifying necessary conditions for something, and we talked about being the essence of the thing as related to sufficient condition for being that thing. So is carrying Righty the essence of Lefty? Well, is anything, if you want to answer that question, you ask this one. Is anything that carries Righty thereby automatically Lefty? Well, if anything that carries Righty is automatically Lefty, then carrying Righty is the essence of Lefty. So if you say yes, then you say, yes, carrying the Righty is the essence of being Lefty. And that means that if, I pick up Righty over here, then I become Lefty. Lefty is just naming whoever it is that's carrying Righty. But if you think the answer is no, if you think lefty isn't just naming whoever it is that's carrying righty, but instead lefty is naming maybe this particular animal, then carrying righty is not the essence of being lefty. Okay, so now how does this all relate, this talk of essences, relate to the four topics? Specifically, how might it unify the four topics that we've discussed? Well, you can think of epistemology as interested in the essence of of rational cognition. When an epistemologist asks, what is rational cognition? The epistemologist is not looking for a list of examples. The epistemologist doesn't want you to say, well, if you add 2 plus 2 and you get 4, that's rational cognition. Or if you infer the simplest theory from a set of otherwise equal theories, that's rational cognition. What the epistemologist wants you to do is say, here's the essence of rational cognition. Here are the necessary conditions such that when you conjoin them, you get a sufficient condition for being rational cognition. Here's like what it really is. Similarly, the ethicist doesn't want a list of morally good and morally bad actions. The ethicist wants to know the essence of moral goodness and moral badness. The ethicist wants to know what it is that makes good actions good and bad actions bad. The ethicist wants to know the essence of morality. Similarly, the political philosopher wants to know what is the essence of just government. What is it to be a just government? And the metaphysician wants to know what is the essence of this or that. What is the essence of a person, or the essence of a table, or the essence of a book? What is it to be that particular thing, or that particular or a member of that kind? Okay. Here's reiterating this. So when we do epistemology, we don't just want to know which ways of thinking happen to be effective. We want to know the essence of correct thinking. When we do moral philosophy, we don't just want to know which actions happen to be good. We want to know the essence of goodness. When we talk about political philosophy, we don't just want a list of governments that function well. We want to know what is good government, what is justice. Similarly, we want to know the essence of reality, minds, persons, and so on and so forth when we're doing metaphysics. Now, essences are closely related to philosophical definitions, and this should be unsurprising given that we introduced the notion of definition when talking about necessary and sufficient conditions, and we defined essences by talking about necessary and sufficient conditions. You would expect definitions to be closely related to essences. I say philosophical definitions here because, as we'll see in a moment, most dictionary definitions aren't really concerned with, or at least many dictionary definitions aren't really concerned with essences. So we need to qualify definitions and say we're interested in a particular kind of definition, which we'll call philosophical definitions or ideal definitions. So why do I say essences and philosophical definitions are closely related? Well, a philosophical definition of S identifies the essence of X, identifies the essence of X, which is to say it tells you what X really is. So, for example, a philosophical definition of sister tells you what it is to be a sister. That is, it tells you the essence of sisterhood. It doesn't tell you that sisters are funny, mean, or sly, or list any other properties they might have. It tells you that sisters are female siblings. It identifies the necessary conditions for being a sister, one necessary condition being female, the other being a sibling, such that when you conjoin them, you get a sufficient condition. This is the essence of sister, and it's also the philosophical definition of sister. A philosophical definition of X specifies necessary and sufficient conditions for being X, thereby giving the complete essence of X. Now, some dictionary definitions, in fact, most dictionary definitions, are not philosophical definitions. So here's an example. We discussed this briefly in class. It's the definition of giraffe from a dictionary. It says a giraffe is a large ruminant mammal inhabiting savannas of tropical Africa. It's the tallest mammal with very long legs and neck and a coloring of regular reddish-brown patches on a beige ground. So let's start by considering how many of these conditions are necessary conditions. So let's say inhabiting the savannas of tropical Africa. If you take lefty here and righty and stick them in a zoo in the United States, do they cease to be giraffes? If you're a kid at a zoo in the US and you point and you're like, look, a giraffe, are you automatically wrong because a necessary condition, an essential property of being a giraffe is being in tropical Africa? Obviously not. This is not a genuine essential property of being a giraffe. How about being the tallest mammal? Is that an essential property of being a giraffe? Well, that's also highly implausible. After all, suppose we grow some mammal to be super tall. Like we take the tallest male and tallest female elephant in the world and we have them breed. And then we take the tallest male and the tallest female animal in the world and we have, of their offspring, and we have them breed. And we do this again and again and again until we create an elephant that's taller than any giraffe. Well, if being the tallest mammal is an essential property of being a giraffe, then when we grow an elephant that's taller than any giraffe, giraffes would no longer exist because there would be nothing that had that, they would no longer have that essential property of being a giraffe. But of course, that's ludicrous. You can't eliminate giraffes from the universe by growing elephants that are taller than giraffes. And consequently, being, the tallest mammal is not an essential property of being a giraffe. And you can say the same things for these others. For example, if we take two of the shortest legged giraffes and have them breed, and we do this several times over so that we have a giraffe that doesn't have very long legs, it seems like it can still be a giraffe. If you have an albino giraffe born, we wouldn't say it's not a giraffe because it doesn't have irregular reddish-brown patches on a beige ground. This definition is not even attempting to give genuine essential properties, specifying the essence of giraffe. Instead, what it's doing is sort of picking some features that are accidental properties of giraffes, but giving you enough of them that it kind of points in the direction of actual giraffes. It'll help you find the giraffes around here, even if it's not really telling you what a giraffe is. And many dictionary definitions are like that. They help you find the thing you're looking for, but they don't really tell you the essence of the thing. They don't tell you what it is to be that kind of thing. Okay. Identifying essences and offering philosophical definitions is important. Why is it important? Well, at the very least, it's important because it helps us see what we're thinking and talking about. You might even say this: if you don't have any sense of what the essence of something is, if you can't say anything when someone says, well, what is it to be a giraffe? Then you don't really know what you're talking about when you talk about giraffes. Or at least you would better understand what you're talking about if you could give the essence of a giraffe, if you could say what it is to be a giraffe. Okay. So we started out by saying, okay, we're going to think of philosophy as a set of topics. Remember, in later videos, we'll look at, and in class next time, we'll look at other conceptions of what philosophy is. But we started out by saying, well, here's one conception. It's a set of topics, just like you might think of science as a set of topics, like physics and biology and chemistry. Then we asked, well, if we're going to think of it that way, what might unify those topics? And we looked at two possible answers. One possible answer is that the topics are unified because they all deal with prescriptivity. They all deal with how things ought to be and not how things are. So how you ought to think for epistemology, not how people in fact do think, which would be doing cognitive psychology. How people ought to act when doing ethics, which isn't investigating how people do act. It's saying here's what they should do. Or how governments ought to be set up, not in fact how they are. That works well for unifying A, B, and C, but it doesn't unify D. As I mentioned in class, maybe we should then say, well, philosophy really does just deal with ought. It does just deal with prescriptions. It does just deal with how you should think, behave, or organize society. And metaphysics should be stripped out because it doesn't do that. It should be moved into science or somewhere else. There's another possibility which unifies all four, and that is the one we just talked about. All four deal with essences, and maybe that's what philosophy does. It deals with essences, the sort of fundamental nature of things. Okay, we're going to stop this video there, and next time we'll talk about another conception of philosophy according to which philosophy is that which does a particular job or a certain set of jobs. Okay.